All right, welcome back. Uh, welcome back, my elite few who are following along, and I hope your lives are interesting and full of fun. And I hope every day brings you new discoveries, new sensations, and new possibilities. I took this one the other day, and I think I look appropriately serious and mystical. I'm sorry. You know, so much of what we engage in this new economy is branding, this word branding, horrible word. It's like that's what you do with slaves. You brand yourself and you're expected to convey the right image to trigger certain associations to attract a certain kind of credibility. But honestly, I don't pretend to have any credibility at all. I don't see how anyone could, given the dimensions of what we're really dealing with. For those of you following along, but here's kind of an interesting experimental image here. And I have a certain look about me, and you have this double image, and I look kind of mysterious. Hmm. Uh, there's a lot. Well, mind magic. How the media manipulate us with the right kinds of imagery, with symbolism, especially. Just dreadful how we go for that stuff. But anyway, I thought this was kind of a cool picture. But always beware of appearances. All right. Section 7 of the Most Holy Trinosophia. I think it says 1933, first published in 1933. Probably the Manly P. Hall edition. And we did cover the introduction, which seemed to be, well, it was fascinating. I did feel at the end of it that it was biased in a subjective way, such that we can't really trust it to be factually accurate. We can view it as a document. We have to look for corroborating documents, and we will go hunting for them. We will unearth as much as we can. Um, and then, even as I've said several times before, the authorship of this treatise, which is, I believe, basically we have to regard it as an alchemical treatise with encoded alchemical instructions and processes. But there are certainly a large number of people who see it as a kind of a map or a description of an inner process. But that was always the goal of alchemy. It had its literal goals, like transmutation of base metals into gold and the homunculus. I didn't talk about the homunculus. This desire to create a tiny human being in an alchemical vessel or chamber. Um, and then it points also to the so-called spiritual life, which honestly, if anyone has any clue as to what that means, please let me know. I don't know what spiritual means. I get very impatient with that word and the other word divine. I don't think they have any real meaning. Nor does the word material or the whatever the opposites of these words are have completely lost meaning or interest to me. And red flags go up in my mind always when I see them. Spiritual. I don't. What is not spiritual? But here, I guess in this section, we're talking about baptism. Uh, Baptism of water and fire. I'm looking at another text, which I'll refer to at the end if I remember. The disintegration of personality, which is the last step toward nirvana, and the preparation of the soul for a superhuman existence, which I guess summarizes why we're doing this at all, you know. The disintegration of personality. Uh, I can tell you what I think that means to me based on my experience with meditation, my recent experiences in meditation, in which I understood, and this is not, I understood very clearly. I saw with a kind of, it wasn't it wasn't a kind of rapture. It's not an experience I can brag about. I just saw very clearly that what we are is infinite. I just saw it. Um, it it didn't blow my mind for days. It wasn't like I felt it wasn't like I reached a new level or that I was somehow ordained by the heavens in any way. Uh, it just felt like in my meditation, I let go and I just saw very clearly that what we are is infinite. We're infinite consciousness, even to the extent that we are human. Even just being human is just a small sliver of who we are, let alone our personalities. When I saw in my meditation that those things that I regarded as myself were just conditioning, even though they were lifelong conditioning, and even though you spend a lot of if you grew up the way I did, you grew up a lot with a lot of self-reflection and seeking, I suppose, some form of redemption, or wanting to be, what should I say? I can only say that I was always, in my early life, I was searching always to be normal. I always felt like there was a key that I would find that would help me be normal and redeem me of my weirdness, or whatever you might call it. But through studying what people are learning with the latest brain science, and discovering this idea that what we are mostly is a vision of our future, rather than being conditioned by our past or past conditioning. What we truly are is in our vision of the future. And in the course of my meditation, keeping this concept very much in the forefront of my mind, I experienced a state in which I understood the infinite nature of this thing, this consciousness that I am. And I saw that my so-called personality was just a tiny, not even imperceptible percentage of just a tiniest sliver of myself, of whatever this is. To even talk about it as a self is limiting. And to even talk about myself, defining myself as human, is very limiting. We are much more than human. We are certainly much more than our genders, our racial background, our national identity, certainly more than our ridiculous ideologies and concepts. And I'm going on a bit here, but I want to make this all mean something. that the disintegration of personality was perhaps what I experienced, which was that the personality, the so-called personality, is just the tiniest, tiny little manifestation, tiny little, like a little tidbit. And when I let go of that, I did experience. I wouldn't say I reached nirvana. I would never claim such a thing. I don't even know that such a thing exists. I think this is all mind control and it's all nonsense, as if you've probably heard me before. But I definitely, to say that here, preparation for this of the soul for a superhuman existence, that's what this is, that's what this series is all about. When we, and I believe that letting go of our so-called personality, of understanding how infinite we are, that is kind of preparing us for a superhuman existence. What do I mean by a superhuman existence? Well, I suppose it's, well, I can't really say for sure. I would just say it's where we go beyond limitations, and we see limitations as almost kind of ephemeral things that don't have any real existence, and that we pursue and entertain notions that previously we would have thought beyond our capabilities, and in proceeding in that direction toward kind of unlimited strength, unlimited perceptual abilities, unlimited intellect, or whatever you call it. I think each of us has our own very distinct ideas of what that would mean to reach our superhuman selves. But that there's nothing really else. There's nothing else in life that has any meaning but that. All the so much of what else the other things we're taught are actually just things that hold us back, that hold us in a pen, a corral. And I think maybe there's something in this text that's alluding to this, but it's inscribed in the alchemical context. So here we are at section 7. Section 7. At the entrance of this gallery stood an oval steel vessel, which, upon my approach, filled with crystal clear water, purified by fine white sand. The vessel rested on 3 brass feet. A black panel had engraved on it several characters on the side facing the door. And there's the Hebrew script on the left there, you can see. Near the vessel was a linen veil, and above the vessel 2 green marble columns supported a round marble plaque. One saw there, surrounded by 2 inscriptions, the figure of the sacred seal, formed of a cross in 4 colors, attached to a golden crosspiece which upheld 2 other concentric circles, the larger one being black, the other red. To one of the columns was attached to a silver axe. That's odd English. With a blue handle. It is called. You can see there. I need to at least be able to sound out the Hebrew. When I get some time, I will figure this out. But anyway, there you can see it. After reading the inscriptions, I went up to the vessel and washed, first my hands, but finished by plunging in bodily. I stayed there 3 days. and on coming out of the water, I saw that it had lost its transparency. Its sand had become grayish, and rust-colored particles stirred in the fluid. Here, let's look at this image. This is the... I can find a better one than this. This is sort of monochromatic here. There you see the two circles, and there's sort of the upside down, the inverted cross. Okay. I tried to dry myself with the linen veil, but fresh drops of water kept taking the place of those the linen absorbed. I gave up trying to dry myself with the veil, and keeping in the shade, I remained there motionless for 6 whole days. And at the end of this time, the source of these waters was exhausted. I found that I was dry and lighter, though my strength seemed to be increased. After walking about for a little while, I returned to the vessel. The water which had been in it was gone. In its place was a reddish liquid. The sand was gray and metallic. I again bathed in it, being careful, however, to remain there only a few moments. When stepping out of it, I noticed that I had absorbed part of the liquid. This time, I did not try to dry myself with the cloth, for the liquor with which I was saturated was so strong and corrosive that it would have instantly destroyed the fabric. I found myself at the other end of the gallery, stretched out on a bed of warm sand, where I spent 7 days. After this time, I returned to the vessel. The water was as it had first appeared. Once more I plunged into it, and after having washed myself carefully, came out. This time I had no difficulty in drying myself. Finally, after having purified myself according to the instructions I had received, I prepared to leave this gallery in which I had spent 16 days. Once more I plunged into it, and after having washed myself carefully, came out. This time I had no difficulty where, whoops, okay, sorry about that, 16 days. Once more I plunged into it, and after having washed myself carefully, came out, and this time I had no difficulty drying myself. Finally, after having purified myself according to the instructions I received, I prepared to leave this gallery. I'm repeating. It's not my fault. What is it? We have some footnotes here. But yeah, it seems like a purification ritual, but it seems to me also kind of like a recipe, as an alchemical recipe, where perhaps the I, the first person in the text, might be the philosopher's stone or something that is put through a series of baths, and then it leaches out, it draws out impurities, and then what's left is something else with a different color, and things are transmuted, and I'm not quite sure. Again, I'm not maintaining that this has any value at all. I'm not maintaining that it doesn't. It is taking us forward, though. I don't know where we'll end up, but you know what? One source that has been helpful to me in perhaps being a little more specific and open-minded, I recommend her channel. Really quite good. Simona Rich. And she delves into this work, and she does value it. She does take it more seriously than I do, and she has done her due diligence. And as you see, she has commentary. When you go to her videos, you can in the show notes, there's commentary, and there's that image, better than the one I had. It's full color, the two circles and the inverted cross. And then she provides some explanation. There we have it. She says here, the key to the seventh plate is equilibrium. This being the virtue bestowed by the seventh sign of the zodiac, Libra, the balance. I happen to be a Libra, whatever that means to anyone. I suppose balance is a kind of virtue. And here she says the author tells us that the central motif, two small circles and a pendant cross, which I called it inverted cross, is a sacred seal. Excuse me. This may be interpreted as the celestial sulfur and salt, the sun and moon. The sun and moon, sulfur and salt. I've never heard of that before. But those of you inclined to look more deeply into alchemy or perhaps know something, maybe this will have more meaning. The suspended cross is the lapis philosophorum, composed of the regenerated elements salt, which is earth, sulfur, fire, mercury, air, and the azoph, the ether, water of the sages. The sun and moon are the father and mother of the philosopher's stone. Very interesting. They represent heaven and earth from which is generated the cross. Man, the progeny of the two immortal agents, spirit and matter. The cross also signifies the equilibrium of man, suspended between his origin and destiny. So I did say a little something about that at the beginning. We are in a feeling of suspension, where we have a choice. We can cling to our origin, that is our conditioning, or we can move forward. I believe, my understanding is, moving forward is into our superhuman potential. But the origin that we are given is a gift. It is our existence. It is that which we work with. There's a quote that I very much like. For those of you who don't know, I am living in Mongolia, and I absolutely love Mongolia, and it's given me a whole new perspective on life. And, Genghis Khan figures very highly in Mongolian philosophy, in Mongolian thought, and even in daily life. And I suppose at this point I'm very much conditioned in that way. And there's a famous quote of Genghis Khan where he says, "I get my ideas from Father Sky, but it is through Mother Earth that I'm able to turn my ideas into reality." And I wonder if this is not something very much akin to this idea. Let's see, what is this? I don't want to get too much in this. Actually, I do recommend Simona Rich, especially when she comments on the current predicament of the world and where we may be going. And I really like her spirit. I I'm more inclined to get through this work and go back into the more historical aspect of Saint Germain and look for clues and look for corroborating evidence in some of the, what do you want to call it, more outrageous purported facts of his life? Is it possible that perhaps Madame Gergy, when she was in Venice, perhaps she thought, or she was introduced to someone with the name of Saint Germain who happened to look very much like the Saint Germain she met 50 years later, and conflated the two and was mistaken? But Saint Germain himself says that he implies that he was educated by his relative of his mother's, the last Medici, which when we'll go into that too, but there's a couple of reasons why I have trouble believing that, in which case he would have been born in 1690 or thereabouts. And I've even come across stories that put his birth at or purports to have evidence that his birth is even farther back than that. But it does relate a lot about what I said earlier about the, as Simona Rich points out, approaching or embracing destiny in an intentional way to allow ourselves to expand into our superhuman potential. And when I look at the figure of Saint Germain, there are many enticing, intriguing qualities of the man. His sense of service, and apparently a very gifted ambassador, trusted by all the courts of Europe, more or less. His mastery of self-sufficiency in the financial sense, his wide-ranging education, his deep artistic sensibilities, as well as actual technical proficiency in music and the visual arts, so much that to me inspire this instinct, I think, that is in all of us to pursue our superhuman potential. But we will get more into it next time. We'll go into part 8. I do recommend Simona Rich's channel. And I hope everyone, I wish everyone beauty, discovery, joy, everything great, everything fantastic, health, exercise. Please get out and exercise. Enjoy the sun. Enjoy each other.